I'm super excited to have Gen Z Bitcoin here, aka Satoshi Guapamoto.
Kicking off episode 1. Come on, how good is that? But now that I'm a Bitcoiner, I think a lot more clearly and I spend money a lot more wisely.
Shift from being a consumer to a creator.
It's very difficult to verify everything in life, but you should at least try.
Now we have this incorruptible ledger that only tells the truth. We need that anchor, and Bitcoin is going to be that anchor.
Right? Bitcoin changes the way you think, the way you view the world, right? Because fiat corrupts the way you think and the way you view the world.
I work as a doctor, and I never thought I'd have a YouTube channel, but I just feel so inspired by Bitcoin. It touched something deep in my soul.
It is truly in the best interest of Bitcoiners to give the truth to other Bitcoiners. Bitcoin is a system that operates outside of all the noise, right? Bitcoin is pure signal. So I say Bitcoin is the new American dream, all right? It's winning the game by not playing.
There's no way to win in the fiat system. Even when you're winning, you're not winning.
The only threats to Bitcoin are existential, right?
And I love that swagger. Love it. Yeah.
Let's go. Oh my gosh.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Signal podcast. I'm super excited to have Gen Z Bitcoin here. I just discovered your channel a couple months ago and it just showed up in my feed. And then the last few days I've been binge watching a lot of your videos and there's massive value on your channel. And I love what you're doing. And I'm so excited to have you here as my first guest. There's a lot of reasons why I'm super excited to have you here. One is, like I said, there's just so much value on your channel. And people who are new to Bitcoin can definitely go to your channel and get massive value, and other Bitcoiners can go and get massive value as well. And then 2, when I've seen you on the screen and in your videos, you basically embody the ethos of Bitcoin. It's clear that you live and breathe Bitcoin and it's almost become who you are. And it's a really infectious type of energy. And that's the kind of energy that I'm going for on this show. And then the third reason that I'm super excited to have you here is you've just got that swagger. You're bringing that swagger to the Bitcoin space, and that's much needed. And I'm just so excited to see where you go with this channel.
Yes, sir. No, I appreciate that big time.
Yeah. So why don't we start with, tell me what your life was like before you found Bitcoin and what your life is like now after you discovered Bitcoin.
First off, Dr. Satoshi, just thank you so much for having me. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how big or small the channel, I'm always honored to speak with a Bitcoiner. So I appreciate you taking the time to try to call me out and have me on the show. And also, we're kicking off episode 1. Come on, how good is that?
There we go.
In terms of how my life was before Bitcoin, right? And you don't realize it until you're out of it, but I was spending so much money on actual garbage. To quote the words of Jay-Z, right? I was spending real money on fake jewelry, on fake clothing, fake designer. Designer is only cool if your dollars match. And even then, it's not cool. You know what I mean? It's truly the epitome of a consumerist mindset, right? You're just buying things to impress people that don't even really like you and that you don't like that much either. You want to try to create a sense of envy in them, even though you are poor yourself, right? So that was definitely more so where my life was headed at that time, right? And once I started to discover investing and discover Bitcoin, focus more on saving, I started selling clothes. I started selling clothes instead of buying them because I didn't need all the stuff that was in my closet. I still have way too many clothes. So there's a lot left to go. But I didn't realize really any of that until after I stopped doing it. So when you're in a certain frame of mind, you just think everything's normal. It's totally fine. Oh, I just got paid today. It's okay for me to continue to blow money on this useless thing that will lose value over time and that I won't even. I know a lot of people watching this probably, you don't wear 100% of your clothes. There's a lot of stuff that you got that's basically junk. If you could touch it and turn it back into money, you would definitely do that. If it was that easy, it's a lot of stuff you'd probably get rid of right now. And that's the trap that we fall into. That was the trap I was in, buying trinkets on Amazon. I was buying stuff that didn't even make sense for me to buy. I had a steam. It was like some sort of steam thing for my clothes, like some sort of steam ironer. I used it once. It sucked. And I didn't want to go through the hassle of trying to send it back. It was a whole thing. So that was the trap I was in. But now that I'm a Bitcoiner, I think a lot more clearly and I spend money a lot more wisely. I really do second guess when I'm about to blow some cheese on something that I probably don't need.
Yeah, I definitely noticed that as well in myself. You shift from being a consumer to a creator. And it's crazy how we fall into that trap and we don't even realize it. But it's so much nicer for your soul to feel like you're creating something from the world as opposed to just constantly consuming. And it's pretty interesting how Bitcoin just it flips that switch. It's not like it tells you to do that. You just develop that mindset and your actions just autocorrect. It's a pretty beautiful thing. Shifting from consumer to creator, in what other ways has it changed you as a person?
It's definitely made me more of a not skeptical, maybe, but you want to actually question things and understand them better, right? You want to actually understand how things work. You don't want to just take everything at face value. You want to dig a
Yeah.
little deeper, even if it does feed into the things that you already believe. It really makes you someone who second guesses and at least double ask, did that actually happen? Is that actually true? Especially in the age of AI, you have to be at least a little bit skeptical. Otherwise, you truly will fall for anything. And there's going to come a point, probably 5 years or less, all right, probably less, maybe two, where no human, even someone who's young, who uses AI tools, who is very used to seeing AI videos and AI photos, it'll be impossible for the human eye to distinguish an AI video from an actual real life video, the same way that it's impossible for the human eye to zoom in and see a germ on a plate. It's not possible for that to happen. It will be impossible for humans to distinguish the truth from falsehood. So I don't really know what that'll do to humanity, but that's a whole different conversation. All I know is that Bitcoin has made me someone who actually has to learn how things work. And it's the ethos of Bitcoin, right? You don't trust, you have to verify it, right? And you verify it to the best of your ability. There's some things that we're not necessarily going to be able to verify. It's just too difficult, but you can always try, right? So I can't read code, but I was still able to verify the Bitcoin network's code because it was open source. And what I did was I fed it into an AI model piece by piece to try to translate it into layman's terms, right? And it took me a long time, but I did do that. And that was back when I was just getting started, very skeptical about Bitcoin when I was going full maxi. So you can try certain things to and use certain tools to overcome the hurdles of having to verify stuff. It's very difficult to verify everything in life, but you should at least try.
Yeah, the point that you're bringing up is a point that a lot of Bitcoiners don't appreciate about Bitcoin, about its role as a truth machine in our society. How it's we've never really had a truth machine, and
Mm,
that's really going to transform society, knowing that there's this incorruptible ledger. Because a lot of our history, we don't even know what actually happened. It's just what the winners said happened. But imagine
mhm.
now we have this incorruptible ledger that only tells the truth. How that's going to change behavior and change the course of humanity. And in a practical sense, in terms of being able to distinguish AI versus what's real, it's going to be crazy. Just a whole world of not being able to distinguish what is real. We need that anchor. And Bitcoin is going to be that anchor, which is going to be a beautiful thing. But I've been following your stuff and I see that you're building this community out. And I've been having this thought recently about how a lot of Bitcoiners, we often think that Bitcoin is just automatically going to fix a lot of things. And it definitely does fix a lot of things. But I don't think us Bitcoiners think enough about our role as individuals and as people that we also need to advance the cause of Bitcoin forward. These things are not just going
Mhm.
to automatically happen. So, what kind of things do you think that Bitcoiners can do to help advance this ethos and make sure that Bitcoin achieves the vision that we all see and know that it's capable of?
I would say that everyone just has to play their part. That's a generic answer.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that is think about what you are good at, what your passion is, right? What you feel like is your purpose in life. Even if it's not your purpose, just think of what are your skills at the moment, right? If you are like you're like a doctor or whatever, you want to integrate Bitcoin as much as you can into your own life, right? And it doesn't necessarily just have to be Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin changes the way you think, the way you view the world, right? Because fiat corrupts the way you think and the way you view the world, right? So fiat food is very bad for you, right? Fast food is fiat food compared to Bitcoin food, as an example. That's something like red meats, eggs, understanding the different types of true nutrients that come from the earth instead of being like a pillhead. You know what I mean? Someone who's addicted to the pharmaceutical industry, right? Fiat driven industries. In terms of Bitcoin, the protocol, We also have to create a circular economy for Bitcoin, right? A lot of people don't really want to spend their Bitcoin. I understand that, because if you go back 15 or 14 years and you bought a shake weight instead of buying Bitcoin, yeah, you lost a lot of money. That was a massive opportunity cost. But the truth is that will always be true. It doesn't matter what time period you're in. That's what people don't seem to realize. So if you're spending $35 of Bitcoin today, or 35,000 sats, whatever it is, in 16 years, yeah, that's going to look like it was a stupid decision. But if no one's doing that, then there are no laws that will be passed to stop capital gains taxes on Bitcoin. There will be no laws passed identifying Bitcoin as a global currency and a global reserve asset and a global store of value. Like, there will be no recognition from the masses to see Bitcoin as not only something that goes up in value, but as money, right? Because the whole purpose is to destroy the current fiat system, because that's what's wrong with everything. All right. Let's say for a second that doesn't happen and Bitcoin is just the new gold. Gold centralized, all right, because it couldn't scale as money, and then it eventually failed. All right. Yes, it took a very long time for that to happen, a couple generations for that to happen, but it happened. The whole point is that we don't want that to happen again. And the way that we do that is by scaling Bitcoin out and using it as money. All right. 16 years from now, they will think it's insane. Some people will, to be spending your Bitcoin. Actually, maybe not. We might not have dollars at that point. So it might not be that crazy. But the whole point is we only get there by utilizing the thing. There's going to be a point where Bitcoin isn't priced in dollars because no one's using dollars. What's the price of Bitcoin in seashells? No one knows, because that's not a thing that we do. That would be stupid. It'll be stupid to price Bitcoin in dollars 20 years from now, right? There are no dollars. What are you talking about? Send me some Satoshis. We only get there by utilizing the actual tool itself. So, not saying to go spend all your Bitcoin all at once, but Bitcoin is money. Money does get spent. So, again, if you're an architect, make beautiful structures. If you're an artist, make Bitcoin art. You know what I mean? The people who made that Satoshi statue out in Europe, that's a legendary statue. That'll be remembered for a really long time. If you are a fitness instructor, you do private lessons, accept Bitcoin. Give people the option. If you have a food truck, accept Bitcoin. You know what I mean? Just stuff like that. We all have to take what we're currently doing, or what we are good at, or what we love, and integrate Bitcoin into it in some way. That was a long-winded answer, but long story short, do Bitcoin in everything that you do as best you can.
Yeah, no, I love that answer. And it seems like there's this whole movement of people who are just so overtaken by Bitcoin that they just feel compelled to incorporate Bitcoin into their life path somehow. And it's a beautiful thing to see. You see all these YouTubers and people who never thought they would have a YouTube channel just feel so compelled to spread this Bitcoin ethos and spread this message. And people like you, it inspired me to do this. Like, I work as a doctor, and I never thought I'd have a YouTube channel, but I just feel so inspired by Bitcoin. It touched something deep in my soul that I have to do something, whatever I can. And I started this YouTube channel, and it's incredible to connect with people like you. And I'm trying to use my background, kind of like you said, use whatever skills you have and incorporate Bitcoin into that. So I'm trying to bridge the gap between Bitcoin and health. And I found that there's a ton of corollaries between those two things.
Absolutely.
One, because of the low time preference mindset that Bitcoin instills in you, it translates perfectly to health. Also, the proof of work concept, the idea that you're not going to be fit, you're not going to lose weight, you're not going to get muscles unless you put in the work. And so I find that when I talk to Bitcoiners, a lot of them naturally develop this low time preference and make changes to their health or their diet. Have you found that you've made some changes in terms of your health or fitness because of Bitcoin?
I will say not because of Bitcoin. I've always been interested in going to the gym, trying to stay in shape. But on the nutrition side of things, I definitely have a lot to learn. And there's a lot of different debates that go on. And there's a lot for me to learn. There's some people who will say, oh, raw milk is good for you because of this and that. Other people will say, no, the bacteria will do this and this to you. You know what I mean? There are clips from back in the day when they had black and white photos of people eating raw meat. And it was like a high class delicacy. I don't know. People would literally just eat a red steak and it wouldn't be cooked. It wouldn't be sitting out all day, of course, but I guess that was a real thing that happened. People still do that today. And of course, you can try to think about how our ancestors used to eat they were eating this type of meat and these types of food. And the reason why our jaw lines and our teeth are as messed up as they are is because we eat so many soft foods as kids and blah, blah, blah. There's a lot to learn. I don't really know it all. So I think that's another area that will continue to evolve, because even something as innocent seeming as breakfast, breakfast is literally something that was pushed by, I believe it was cereal companies, but basically companies that were coming up that were like, oh, you know what? We need a way to try to sell our products. So we're going to say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, even though it pretty much dulls your senses. And we're going to say, oh, breakfast is really healthy. These Fruit Loops are really healthy. It's part of a balanced breakfast. Really? A bunch of sugary, high carb, high processed, painted, dyed garbage is a part of a balanced breakfast? Yeah, okay, genius. You know what I mean? So just stuff like that. The original food pyramid, talking about, oh, you need to be eating more grains. You need to eat mostly bread. Like, bro, are you dumb? You know what I'm saying? Like, just stuff like that is literally ridiculous. And you wouldn't know that because in school, you come up, they just say, yeah, the food pyramid, this is what you should be eating, kids. You need to be eating like an entire loaf of bread a day. That's pretty much what that stuff says. What are you talking about? So it's hard to know what is true and what is a little bit too far, like a little, what is actually conspiracy. And it takes time. It takes proof of work. You got to figure it out. And again, it's going to take experts who don't have their opinions skewed, right? There's a lot of experts who came to their conclusions because they needed funding, right? They needed a corporation to give them a grant or to bail them out, or someone slid them some money to have a certain type of finding. If you're a statistician, if you do statistics for a living, a lot of that stuff is manipulated. You know what I mean? I took 2 statistics classes in college, and it's very easy to manipulate statistics. And a lot of them are manipulated in the benefit of someone with a lot of money. So just stuff like that. It's just hard to believe things when the incentives are misaligned. I think Bitcoiners have their incentives aligned, and that's the reason why their research and their findings are so contrary to a lot of mainstream talking points. It is truly in the best interest of Bitcoiners to give the truth to other Bitcoiners. And I think that's what will make us so much stronger than any other group of people going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I saw, or one of the things I like about your videos is how you put a nice twist on things. For instance, there was this one video you were talking about J. Cole and how
Yes.
J. Cole, he won the game by not playing the game. I love that analogy because that's basically what we're doing with Bitcoin. Can you expand on that analogy a little bit?
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. All right. That video has basically no views. All
No,
right.
that's
And
incredible.
it's underrated, literally
Yeah,
underrated.
yeah.
And some people are like, oh, you shouldn't say that about your own videos. Bruh, I'm just being aware. All right. I have common sense. That's an underrated video. All right. And I appreciate you for realizing that. I'm glad you love that one. Basically, long story short, for everyone's not involved in too much pop culture, I know I'm not. This just happened to be a thing that I was into at the time. When Drake, who's a Canadian rapper, was beefing with Kendrick Lamar, who's an American rapper, they were going back and forth. And J. Cole is another American rapper. He was friends with Drake. All right. Drake got cooked. He got smoked. He got exposed. It's unfortunate. I like Drake, but that's what happened. And J. Cole decided really not to take anybody's side, even though he was Drake's friend. He was trying to stay out of it because he doesn't really have any issues with Kendrick Lamar. And what ended up happening over time was that everybody started to see J. Cole is actually a genius by not getting involved in this whole thing. His numbers went up. All of his records sold more. He got a bunch of streams, and he didn't really have to do anything. He was barely taking part in the whole back and forth. He might have said 1 or 2 things here and there, but he basically enjoyed his life, did his thing. And then after the dust settled, he came back and dropped a song. It was an amazing song, and it just recapped everything that happened during the beef, right? And talked about how we should be focused on other things and don't let that hold you down and blah, 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 blah. It was an uplifting message, and he was able to eat off of the situation. So J. Cole won the game by not playing. All right. He basically put nothing at stake, and he went ahead and he came up off of the fact that he stayed out of it. Everyone was still saying his name. Everybody was still looking to him. Oh, is he going to say this? Is he going to drop that? He was still getting a lot of attention and notoriety, even though he wasn't involved directly. And then when he did get involved, he was able to eat off it more without stirring the pot and reactivating everything. Bitcoin is a system that operates outside of all of the noise, right? Bitcoin is pure signal. So when we're focusing on Bitcoin issues, if we're talking about Bitcoin topics, if we're utilizing Bitcoin, what we're doing is we're focusing on a system that is outside of all of the noise, right? There's so many different things going on in the world. I'm not saying that they're all irrelevant, but when you're a Bitcoiner, you are focused so much on the future of sound money and how much that means to humanity. Everything else seems pretty minute, right? Obviously, global wars like nuclear wars, that's an existential issue. That's something that, yeah, we should probably try to pay attention to. But another thing about Bitcoin is it makes you focus on what you can control, right? Like the truth is, all right, you can cope as much as you want. You cannot actually control whether or not nuclear war happens. You do not have that decision, right? You don't have that level of autonomy. Like you cannot stop that, unfortunately. It is what it is. That's just real life. That's the state of the world. But with Bitcoin, we have the ability to control our economic future, right? If we make it to that future, we get to control that, right? We get to actually take control of our destiny. That's why people like Jack Mallers and Michael Saylor say that Bitcoin is the new manifest destiny. All right. And I say Bitcoin is the new American dream, right? Because it allows you to do what you need to do because you're preserving your purchasing power. You have real money now, right? You don't have government issued utility tokens, aka fiat, aka US dollars. You know what I mean? It's operating outside of this system, right? It's not affected by a lot of the evil or selfish decisions that are made by a lot of these politicians who claim to have our best interest in mind, right? It's not operating within the confines of the government. It's operating outside the control of any government. All right. It's winning the game by not playing. That's basically what I was trying to say with that video. And I'm so happy that you watched that one. Thank you. That's a great one.
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved it. And I think it's basically what us Bitcoiners are doing. There's no way to win in the fiat system. Even when you're winning, you're not winning. So the only way to really compete with that is to move over to the Bitcoin standard, move your energy out of the fiat world and into the Bitcoin world. And you're going to be a lot happier.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was a great video. Your channel is just filled with amazing analogies like that. Another thing that really stuck out to me on one of your videos, or I think you said it a couple times, is how you smoked Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett's got nothing on you. And
Yeah.
that really resonated with me because Warren Buffett is probably the reason why it took me a little longer to finally understand Bitcoin, because Warren Buffett is someone that I previously looked up to and thought he was very pragmatic. And when he said something about finance, I listened. And so when he says Bitcoin is rat poison, that probably set me back a few years in terms of finally getting to Bitcoin. And so for that reason, I like that you said that about him. But then also, it's just true. If you just invest in Bitcoin, you will outperform any hedge manager, even the greatest investor of all time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
can you expand on that a little bit?
yeah, no, these guys
Yeah,
can't hang with me. You know what I mean? Paul Truder Jones can't hang with
yeah,
me. Ken Griffin can't hang with me. Like you said, Munger and Buffett, they can't hang with me. Like their numbers are not as good as mine. And some people are going to sit here and they're going to say, actually, they're billionaires and you're broke. What I'm talking about is percentages. All right. If you understand investing, anyone who's a serious investor understands that percentages are what actually matter. Right. So over time, Warren Buffett was making like 10%, 10%, 20%, 10%, and it just kept compounding. All right. That's pretty good, right? Nothing wrong with that. He had a slow grind. That kid has been investing since he was like 10. So he had 80 years of compound interest. Most of Warren Buffett's money was made in like the last 3 years because all those other years have compounded onto themselves. So if you understand math, if you understand exponentials, if you understand percentages, then you'll understand why Warren Buffett has so much money. All right. Now, if you get into my position, I've been investing pretty much since I was 19, right? But I've really been in Bitcoin heavily since 2022, right? So we'll just call it 3 years deep. If Bitcoin has a compound annual growth rate of 60%, and let's just assume that dollars never go away, where will I be at in 20 years? I will have already surpassed Buffett in fiat terms. That's not possible. It's not possible. Okay, we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? But the truth is, as a percentage, I am beating every hedge fund. And I guess that's the sick joke of Bitcoin, right? It's that all these guys with their 20 screens and their Bloomberg terminals and all their AI tools and all their assistants and all their money and all of their data can't compete with a kid who lives in his mom's basement. They're not even close. If it was close, maybe I wouldn't be talking so much. It's not close. Look up how much hedge funds performed in 2024. Most of them were negative, especially in real terms, because if inflation is 7% and a hedge fund has a return rate of 15%, all they did was barely generate 8% of value. You know what I mean? That's not impressive. That's horrible. That's disgusting. You're paying someone to barely make any money. What are you doing? So I think the age of the hedge fund is over unless they start buying Bitcoin or investing in Bitcoin adjacent companies only. Pretty much that's it. If you're not in the Magnificent Seven, then you're cooked as a company. So all the other companies have to basically start buying Bitcoin or adding it to their balance sheet in some way. Otherwise, they just go to zero. And any hedge fund that wants to be serious and competitive and not get laughed out of the room needs to buy Bitcoin adjacent companies, or basically just buy the Magnificent Seven. And of course, from the outside looking in, if you're an investor, why would you buy a hedge fund that all they're doing is buying the Magnificent Seven? You should just buy the Mag 7 yourself. Pretty easy. And then you look at the Mag 7, they're all losing to Bitcoin. So why wouldn't you just buy Bitcoin? It's pretty easy. You know what I mean? It's just common sense. It's just percentages. It's just numbers. It's just math. It's just time. So the real question most people have is, will this keep going? Will you understand the fundamentals of Bitcoin? You do realize there's no reason for this to stop. The only threats to Bitcoin are existential, right? Like a nuclear war. Yes, a nuclear warhead drops on my head. I won't be stacking any more Bitcoin. That'll be the end for me. But up until that point, yeah, I'm gonna keep beating all the hedge funds and all their employees. They should just hire me, honestly. Just hire me as the manager. Not only will I bring a fun vibe to the office, but I'll also actually bring some money in for you guys. So that's all I can say, man. It's just the truth. I'm just going off the numbers.
Man, I love that swagger. Love it. The other thing that I really liked about watching your videos is you mentioned this guy, Yoni Appleberg, a couple times. And I actually have a very similar story as you. I was already into Bitcoin, but I wasn't a maxi at that point. I was still thinking in dollar terms and still thinking of it as an investment. But I came across a Yoni Appleberg video called Element Zero.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. Oh my gosh. That might be his second best video ever.
Oh man, that my mind was just blown immediately when I saw that video, and I immediately
Yes.
watched every video on his channel and stayed up
Yes.
all night. And
Yes.
funny, you had the exact same experience with the
Yes,
same
dude.
guy.
Yoni is underrated. I'm doing a
Yeah.
reaction video right now. I'm working
Yeah.
on it for the video that turned me into a maxi pretty much. So that I love that for you. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, that Element Zero. For any Bitcoiners watching this, please go watch this video called Element
Fire.
Zero by Yoni Appleberg.
Fire.
It will blow your mind.
It's so fire, dude. Like videos like
Yeah,
that are what make Bitcoin so amazing. It's what
yeah,
gets you into the rabbit hole. It's what starts your curiosity. And
yeah,
also, it shows the true genius of what Satoshi discovered. Truly the greatest invention of all time. It's not overhyped. That is not an overstatement. There's literally nothing that is more impressive and more interesting than the invention of Bitcoin. And once you understand that, you can't stop learning about it. It's just awesome.
yeah. Yeah, that concept of element zero, it still blows my mind when I think about it today. He basically talks about how Bitcoin doesn't have any mass, it doesn't have a proton or a neutron, but it is able to bind electricity and have an effect on the physical world despite not existing in the physical world. And just bridging the gap between the physical world and the informational realm and the digital world, it will blow your mind. You also have this quote where you say, if you can buy Bitcoin using dollars, then it's basically free. Can you expand on that?
Dude, I gotta say, you've actually done your homework. You are a legend. I appreciate you because the amount of videos you had to watch to find some of these lines, this feels like you know who Nardwar is? Yeah, this is like a Nardwar video. This is amazing. If you can buy Bitcoin with dollars, it's free. And the reason why is because there's gonna come a point where it's worth an infinite amount of dollars. So that means you won't be able to buy it. And now you have to work for it or do something for it. I don't really know what that'll even look like. But it's the same as, let's take it back in time, because people have a hard time ever conceptualizing or believing something like that. That's a ludicrous statement in the minds of most people. But there's a time where wampum, which are basically fancy seashells, were money. That was real. That happened in real life. Hundreds of thousands of people actually use that as money. Okay. How much wampum does it cost to buy a house or a Bitcoin or a car or anything today? We don't really know. And even if we did know, we would probably guess that the number is close to infinity, because how many seashells can I give to the Mercedes-Benz dealership for them to be like, okay, you know what? That's just so many seashells. Here you go. Here's that S-Class, right? That's probably not going to happen, right? Because that's not real money. It doesn't have value to them. All you're going to do is piss them off because you're basically littering on their property when you bring them a bunch of seashells. There was a time when Roman coins were money. All right. Now, those were made out of precious metals, right? They were made out of steel, or sorry, not steel. They're made out of silver. Some of them were gold coins, whatever it is. So those are a little bit different because you can melt them down and then turn them into something else and then convert that into money. But there was money before that was not metallic, right? There were things called rye stones. Rye stones were just rocks that were carved a very specific way, and they were owned by someone and they had value, right? You cannot bring a bunch of fancy rocks, which technically that's what gold is. But anyway, you cannot bring a hideous looking rye stone anywhere and try to buy something. That won't work. There's going to come a point where you cannot bring a piece of paper somewhere and buy something. Understand that. They went from seashells to tobacco bushels of wheat, that was money, to rocks, to paper. Okay. In the future, people will look back and they will say, these ridiculous cavemen were using paper to buy stuff. How stupid of them. That's going to happen. So if you understand that, you're going to realize that eventually no one's going to want paper for real money. No one's going to want paper for Bitcoin. So if you have the opportunity to give paper away for Bitcoin, which is real money, that means you basically got the Bitcoin for free. All right. There will come a point where no one will take the paper and you will not be able to get any Bitcoin for paper. So I would recommend you get rid of as much paper as possible and get as much Bitcoin as possible while you have that option, because there's going to come a point where there's nothing but hard labor in front of you in terms of getting some Satoshis. And for all the newbies, Satoshis are the pieces of a Bitcoin.
So how long do you think it's going to take for us to go into this hyper Bitcoinized world?
Hey, also, I'm starting a petition. Every time someone says hyper Bitcoinized or hyper Bitcoinization, don't do it. All right. Just say Bitcoinized. We're going into a Bitcoinized world, right? We're going into a Bitcoin world. I just think hyper Bitcoinization just sounds weird. We're just experiencing Bitcoinization. You know what I mean? That's just my opinion. All right. I'm trying to push that petition. Every time someone says it, I got to tell them. So you make the decision for yourself if you'll continue to say hyper Bitcoinization or just Bitcoinization. Even rapid Bitcoinization, I feel like sounds better than hyper. I don't know. My opinion. How long will it take? I don't know. That's the thing. We never know. But I would say Bitcoin went from 0 to over 100,000 in 16 years. I would say 20 years from now, I think we'll be at the actual end of fiat. There will not be much more time left for the dollar if it's still around. And I really mean that. Like, think of the implications of that. 20 years from now, Bitcoin will probably be the only money, right? If not, it will be very close to being the only money on earth. And that's a very insane thing to even think about, right? First, we got to make it there. People have to live to make it 20 years into the future. But if we do make it, I don't really see a reason why we would still be using paper. It would be highly unlikely, especially given the rise of AI and robotics by that time. 20 years from now, we cannot imagine, the same way that nobody in 2005 could have ever imagined we'd be talking on this, right? They didn't even have an iPhone back then. 2005, that was before the iPhone. So it would have been impossible to predict that we'd be doing what we're doing today. It's easy to say things like, oh, flying cars or whatever, right? Because they've been saying that for 100 years. But predicting what will actually happen is extremely hard because the dollar has a big network effect, right? People understand the dollar. They've been born and grew up with the dollar. Their grandparents grew up with the dollar. So that's hard to shake people off of. But as the new generation comes up and the old generation dies off, these transitions do happen. I just don't know how quickly they do happen. So I'll say 20 years, because 20 years we'll be in 2045. That sounds like a really far away time. So
Yeah.
I say the dollar's probably cooked at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. I think it would probably happen sooner, but yeah, we'll see.
Fair enough.
I just put out a video talking about how in 100 years, they're going to look back at this time and they're going to see that it was a time of this global awakening, and the Bitcoiners of today are going to be known as basically modern day philosophers. And you strike me as a person who's like a Bitcoin visionary. In 100 years, people are going to look back at your kind of content and they're going to look at you as like a modern day philosopher. And I'm just curious, because I think about this a lot for myself. What was it about myself, or what was it about you or other Bitcoiners that allowed you to see this and make it so obvious to you, whereas your peers, it's not obvious to them? So what was that? I view it as a gift. I'm thankful for it every day. But I'm just curious, what do you think it was about you that made you open to this and see it?
Yeah, I think everybody's story is a little bit different. There's a lot of people who will just say, God bless Bitcoin. And it
Yeah.
just was given to me by a higher power. I was allowed to see, I was given vision to see and ears to hear. You know what I'm saying? For me, I think it just came down to I was a young person. I was never against Bitcoin. I always thought it was okay. I thought it was interesting. Never thought it was a scam, never thought it was bad. And that's just because I came up in the digital age, grew up playing video games and dealing with digital skins and in-app purchases and loot boxes and surprise boxes online, stuff like that. So I never really saw Bitcoin any other way. Now, being able to see it for what it is a whole different level, right? Because I didn't have the hurdle of overcoming the idea of it being fake or a scam. I just thought it was just whatever, who cares? But being able to see it as not just number go up, but as a freedom technology, as a powerful generational technology, that only happened, in my opinion, because I went through so much. On Voyager, I was buying Bitcoin. Voyager went to zero. I lost Bitcoin. I got burned. I ignored Bitcoin for a while because I thought it was never really going to come back and I was never getting my money back ever. Then Bitcoin starts roaring back, right? I remember buying the dip. I'll never forget it. Me and my brother talk about it almost like every other day. I was picking him up from work and we were driving. I believe it was December of 2023 or December of 2022, sometime during the bear market. And we were looking at the price of Bitcoin and it was so dead. And I was like, okay, it's so low. If I buy in right now, this is like 1/4 of the price that I was buying it at before. So let's just start stacking again. And then around that time is when I found the Yoni Appleberg video about how does mining work, because I was like, how is this thing coming back? It didn't go to zero. It's just lower. Maybe I can start building my money back and maybe I can not lose all my money next time. So that was really my journey. And once I started looking back into Bitcoin, I started discovering how it works. And then the rest is history. So some people will discover it through work. A lot of the people I work with, because I work in logistics, right? I do a lot of shipping, distribution, helping manufacturers and freight forwarders, stuff like that. A lot of people that I work with, when I send in trucks to go pick up their equipment, whether it's like generators or electrical equipment or the Bitcoin miners, I ask them, how did you get into Bitcoin? They'll say, oh, because of this job. Before I was just an electrician, but I got hired by this Bitcoin company. Then I started to learn about Bitcoin and now I'm all in on Bitcoin. I think it's great. Oh, I'm a construction guy and I had to go build a Bitcoin mining facility. And I just found it interesting because I talked to a bunch of people there and now I'm more into Bitcoin. There was one guy, he read the Bitcoin standard because all the power was out in his house. And all he had was like a bunch of candles, like some fake candles and a book. And that's how he passed time. And before that, he never really cared about Bitcoin, but it just so happened that there were blackouts and he had nothing else better to do. So everybody has their own Bitcoin story. And I think eventually it won't be special. You bring up the idea of Bitcoin philosophers. That's a very interesting concept. I don't know if that will actually happen. And the reason why is because Bitcoin might be so normal. Who were the internet philosophers of the day? I don't know. Maybe Steve Jobs, you might say, because he was a visionary in terms of technology. But no one really knows who the people were who were coming up and defending the internet back in the day, because who cares? Everybody used the internet. That was obvious. It was obvious technology, except it wasn't, right? It's obvious to us, but I'm just saying the masses will say it was obvious. Who cares? This guy was talking about Bitcoin back in 2000, whatever. Good for him, but it was obvious. Who cares about who he was? So that's my opinion. I think that's
Yeah.
what will happen.
Something I've been thinking a lot about lately is as adoption increases, we're going to have all these people coming into Bitcoin, and they may not necessarily understand the principles. They may not ever get to the point of understanding it as freedom technology. And I worry that as more of these products come out and people are owning Bitcoin and not even realizing it, not even understanding, that message of the freedom technology might get lost. And I've been thinking that people like you and other people that see it as freedom technology, is it up to us to make sure that message doesn't get lost? And do we have to be concerned about that message dying out and Bitcoin, like you mentioned earlier, Bitcoin becoming just the new gold and that freedom technology message dies? Or do you think it's just inevitable and it doesn't matter?
This is interesting because Bitcoin University had a video about this not too long ago where he was talking about Bitcoin will not be fine and Bitcoin will be fine. Bitcoin is inevitable because we make it inevitable, So it's an interesting kind of catch 22, but essentially Bitcoin will be freedom money because there's no other way for us to really talk about it. You know what I mean? There's too many people who talk about it in that way. And it's almost like this mind virus that spreads virally. And because of that, that's just how it's going to be. Right. That doesn't mean that we can just sit on our laurels or whatever, but it's almost, there's no other way to talk about it. You know what I mean? There's no other way to really explain the full value proposition of it. So, because Bitcoin is inherently designed in that way, because it is inherently a freedom technology and a censorship resistant technology, that's how we will talk about it. So, that message will be pushed, and that's how it will be remembered. That's how it will go down. I know there's a lot of people in the space coming in who only want exposure to things that go up, like Bitcoin treasury companies and whatever. And there's nothing really wrong with those companies. They're all just doing what they have to do, which is adopt a Bitcoin standard or go to zero. But every new bill run brings new people who get burned. And I'm not sure if there will even be bear markets at this point with the amount of volume in terms of buying that we're seeing. But if there are, people will get burned and they'll learn like me. I got burned and then I became a maxi. It took time, but that happened. Same with people who are coming into the space now. You might get burned a little bit, especially if you don't exactly know everything that's happening. You don't know what you own. That's all right. You can't really force it. It just takes time. I do think over time, everyone will get to the level that me and you are at.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the optimism for sure. And your name, Gen Z Bitcoin. I love the idea of educating the new generation. And how is it with other Gen Z? How is it with your peers? What are their thoughts on Bitcoin? Do you have a lot of people in your life that you talk with them about Bitcoin?
Yeah. So when it comes to young people, I wouldn't say they're necessarily super for it or super against it. They just need someone that they can trust to help guide them to Bitcoin. They're a lot easier, I feel like. And it's because just like me, they grew up in a digital age. All right. People who are born today in 2025, they won't know anything but Bitcoin, my opinion. Because again, like I said, 20 years from now, 2045, every kid who's 0 years old will be 20 years old and they'll all be using Bitcoin. They probably won't even have bank accounts. I can't say for sure. It's hard to say. 20 years is a long time out, but it's just like how I grew up with credit cards. If you go back a certain amount of time, people didn't grow up with credit cards. 20 years back, they didn't grow up with tap to pay. That was not a thing. So it's very obvious and easy and convenient now, but it might not seem that way to someone who came up in a different era. That's why old people will literally stare at the machine in Walmart saying, please remove your card now. They're just letting it beep. They don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? Like, of course, over time, they start to get it, but it's just harder. It takes longer for them to understand and adopt technology because they didn't come up with it. And I do think that with Gen Zers, because we're coming up in a digital age, it is easier to make that transition. Some people are going to be stuck in their ways. It doesn't really matter how old or how young they are. But I would say the majority of Gen Zers are more interested in Bitcoin because they understand that inflation is crushing them and they don't exactly know what to do. But if you're that person who's there for them, kind of explaining the way out of the system, they're more willing to try to take that first leap and start dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin. But the truth is, we just need to generate curiosity in people because that's how you truly educate someone on anything. Memorizing stuff is not education. Telling people to just buy Bitcoin is not education, because most likely they're going to buy it and then sell it all at a really stupid time. So that's not education. It just starts with curiosity. So if anyone was curious about it, I'd say Gen Zers over anyone else. And then maybe Gen Alpha, but I don't really talk to a lot of super young kids. People my age, they're on the fence. They just need someone like me to give them a little helpful shove.
And besides your YouTube channel, are there other ways that you're educating your generation?
Yeah, I would say again at work, my job is
Yeah.
mostly young people, right?
Yeah.
Between the ages of 28 and 21. And my office is about 100 people. So I'd say 80% falling within that age range, maybe 90% fall within that age range. And what I like to do is a lot of my customers are Bitcoin customers, right? And people will ask me, how are you moving freight for a Bitcoin company? Bitcoin's digital. So one, that just shows how early we are. And two, it gives me an excuse to try to talk about Bitcoin. Now, am I the annoying Bitcoin guy at work? It depends on what you determine as annoying, but I would say no. But something like this, as simple as this, I'll wear this to work. That's a simple and silent signal that kind of shows people that you're a Bitcoiner. They might not know exactly what Bitcoin is, but they're able to identify this symbol in this color, right? Oh, that's a Bitcoin hat. You know what I mean? That's silent signaling. But when people do ask, then I tell them, oh, this is what a Bitcoin miner looks like, and this is how mining works. And I'll break it down to them in like 2 minutes. I won't do the whole, they do SHA-256, and it's actually elliptical curve hashing algorithms, and it requires this much energy. It's just a very simple, this is what a Bitcoin miner looks like. I move these. Basically, they guess a number, and the person gets rewarded with Bitcoin. Hut 8 is a Bitcoin guessing number company. And that's just enough to give them a nugget of information. And maybe if they're curious, they will ask a little bit more. And I'll be sure to emphasize that's the super simple explanation. If you want me to explain it more, ask me anytime. And then maybe some other time later in the week, they'll come ask about this or that. And the reason why it's interesting is because some of the companies I work with, they have very high sales, right? You know what I mean? They have a lot of volume, they do a lot of shipments, and they spend a lot of money. And because of that, I get shout outs in the office. Oh, today Jordan's doing this much and he's in platinum in sales, he's gold in sales, whatever. And they're like, how is this happening? Who's your customer? My customer is a Bitcoin customer. And again, it just creates intrigue. And I just think it's awesome. You know what I mean? I don't have a Bitcoin job. I've turned my job into a Bitcoin job because I'm working with who I want to work with. And I want to align myself with Bitcoin companies. And it's great because with my expertise, people want to work with me because I actually care about their commodity. First thing that you, maybe not the first thing you learn in sales, but the most important thing that you're going to ever learn in sales is that you actually have to be trustworthy. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And the truth is, a lot of these guys, I'm doing it because I love working with them. You know what I mean? I think that their commodity is important. I feel like I'm etching my name in history every time I do a shipment with some of these guys. So that's always cool to me. That's why they
Yeah.
trust me. They can give me more responsibility and more shipments at one time because they know I'll handle it. And if anything goes wrong, I'll work diligently to make sure it goes right. So that's how I feel in terms of people at my job, orange pilling. I'm going to give a presentation at my job as well, actually, about Bitcoin after hours, just because it's just something to do.
How has it gone with your family? Have they been receptive?
My brother, he's a Bitcoiner for
Yeah.
sure. He got on it because I helped him to get on it. In terms of the rest of my family, they're all interested in it. They see me doing my thing, but they're not in it as much as they should be. And again, you can't really force anyone to take action. It is what it is. But everyone knows I'm the Bitcoin person. Like my cousins, my grandma, everybody knows that, and it's
Mhm.
because you have to embody the Bitcoin ethos. You rock the Bitcoin merch if you want. You don't have to do that. But I rock Bitcoin merch so they know, oh, it's Bitcoin. Oh, he's been buying Bitcoin since this long. Oh, Bitcoin just hit 100,000. Oh, he talks about Bitcoin every now and then at a family reunion. So I remember he mentioned it in passing 2 years ago. Now it's double the price. Let me go reach out to him. Hey, how's the Bitcoin thing going? You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So you're
Yeah.
planting the seed of curiosity at all times. That's how I see it anyway. When I go to the gym, if I go out, if I have a Bitcoin shirt I can wear or a Bitcoin hat or Bitcoin Crocs, I'll wear it because I'm sending a very silent signal to anyone who looks at me for longer than 1 second. They're going to see, oh, Bitcoin, and then they'll go about their day. It's just planting a seed in a way that's as not annoying as possible.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you. You mentioned in a couple of your videos that you've got big plans for your channel. So I'm just curious, what's your vision and what kind of things you have in the works coming up?
As I get more money and as my purchasing power grows, I just want to start doing crazy stuff. I want to start doing Mr. Beast style videos where we are just giving away hundreds of thousands of Satoshis. Maybe not hundred thousands of Satoshis, but like thousands and thousands of Satoshis. And that might not seem like a big deal at the moment, giving away 10,000 Satoshis, but I want to save up enough Bitcoin, have enough Bitcoin to the point in the future where giving away 100,000 sats as a grand prize is the equivalent of giving away $1,000 or something. You know what I mean? Just being able to do stuff like that, like it's nothing. You know, that's what I really want to do. Put on awesome events. I want to do a Bitcoin boxing event. That's going to take a lot of money, but I want to have creators show up and literally throw hands because I love combat sports. You know, I love training combat sports. So to be involved in big events like that, it's going to take a lot of time and effort, but I'm talking about it now because it's something that's inevitable because I'm going to just do it the same way that Bitcoin is inevitable, right? So once we get to a certain level, there's going to be an event that maybe I host a big Bitcoin boxing event and the grand prize is 1 Bitcoin. And people are going to say, oh my God, he's giving away one whole Bitcoin. Oh my goodness, because it'll be so much value at that point in the future. It might be 10 years down the line, it might be 5 years, but that's something that I want to do, right? So when I say I have big plans for the channel, it might not be something that happens tomorrow. Right now, I'm still just building fan base and building the levels of education, making my channel a resource for people who want to get into the network at any point in time. But in the future, when I have more capital to just let go of, I want to give away a bunch of money. That's basically what I want to do. I want to have so much money, I can literally just give it away and make it all back. Because when you think about someone like Mr. Beast, if Mr. Beast gives away $1 million in a YouTube video, he probably makes that back with the video views and with sponsors. So it's infinite money pretty much. Also, you can write off a lot of that stuff. So that's basically what I want to do. I want to be able to give away an infinite amount of money over time.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I can't wait to see where your channel goes. And yeah, what you're describing is a similar mindset that a lot of Bitcoiners have. We just want to make the world a better place and we want to give as much value as we can. And I appreciate you so much for coming on. Delivered a tremendous amount of value here.
It's over already? Yeah. Oh my God. Wow.
We can keep going if you want.
Look, how about one more question for me?
Okay.
And then we'll go ahead.
So you had this incredible video where you mentioned you debunked this idea that where people often say Bitcoin is a solution in need of a problem. And you debunked that by saying, no, it's actually solving all these problems. And you talked about money, energy, and war. And I thought that was an incredible video because it does explain very succinctly how Bitcoin tangibly does fix a lot of issues. Because as Bitcoiners, we often say, fix the money, fix the world, but we don't often provide tangible examples of that. So can you just talk a little bit about how Bitcoin actually is going to fix the world?
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll say like in terms of energy, right? Oh, Bitcoin just uses too much energy. It's going to destroy the earth. That's obviously not true. The earth is totally fine. And if anything, Bitcoin's actually utilizing clean energy because that is common sense. And the reason why it's common sense is because Bitcoiners want to try to mine Bitcoin for as cheap as possible, right? So if you're paying $1 a kilowatt or whatever, that's horrible. You're never going to make any money mining Bitcoin. It's too expensive to get the electricity to run your machine. You want a wind farm. You want a solar farm. You want a hydro facility. You want to use flared gas. You want to find stranded energy that is clean. You don't want to do fracking and then burn oil. You know what I mean? That's way too expensive. You don't want to do an offshore oil rig. That is way too expensive. You want something cheap and easy. And the thing that's great about Bitcoin is you can go wherever the energy is and get it for cheap. So if we need to build out more renewables, it might not be economically feasible to build out a bunch of clean energy stuff in Africa, right? Or a bunch of clean energy initiatives out in Texas, right? It just might not be feasible to do that. But with Bitcoin, wherever you're building on site, whether it is a bunch of solar panel stuff, flared gas, a bunch of, again, hydropower, You are literally making money wherever you bring the site. Wherever that energy is, as soon as you capture it and start utilizing Bitcoin mining to mine for blocks and validate transactions, you're going to be rewarded. You're going to receive Bitcoin for your efforts, for utilizing clean energy, right? Bitcoin helps to stabilize the grid. All right. Batteries don't hold power forever. All right. This is the simple way of breaking this down. Batteries don't hold energy forever. If you have a AA battery and you leave it inside of a tin can for 100 years, it won't work. It's going to leak energy slowly, it leaks energy. So the grid is very similar. Sometimes if you're using massive wind farms and people aren't using the energy quickly enough, right, you're going to have a bunch of stored energy inside of batteries that slowly leak that energy because they cannot efficiently hold that much power. With the excess energy, you're able to mine Bitcoin. So not only are you meeting the needs of their entire city or whatever it might be, you're gaining value on the back end because there's so much excess energy not being used that you can mine Bitcoin with it and make money with the extra energy. Now, maybe there's a point where you need more energy. The load on the grid needs to be sent to the people because now it's summertime. They're running their ACs. They're running cold water. They need to do whatever they got to do. Turn off the Bitcoin miners. The excess energy is now being put towards the city, making sure everything's good. All right. So there's never a situation where you're like, oh, all the Bitcoin energy is going to take away from my day-to-day living. No, it's going to stabilize your grid. All right. It's going to bring your taxes down because a lot of these power companies are able to mine Bitcoin. They're gaining value. There's no need to raise the power prices. You're literally bringing power prices down because you're mining Bitcoin and integrating it into the grid. All right. We've already seen this happen multiple places in the United States and in Europe. Then in terms of war, right? The reason why you couldn't go to war on a whim back in the day is because you actually, one, had to rally the troops. All right. And two, you actually had to have the funding for the war. You had to pay the mercenaries. Now in the fiat system, one, you don't even need to rally that many troops. Most war is fought without people. Okay. There are very few people involved in war, mostly civilians. And when you are fighting a war, you're using drones, you're using planes, striking like that. You're not really sending a bunch of people to the front lines like it's the Civil War and they got muskets. You can fight a war from the comfort of your house. You just pilot the drone and then you just blow people up very easily. The second thing is you don't need the approval of the people or of the mercenaries because you can just print the money and then pay them with that. Oh, we actually have an infinite amount of money, which means we can fight an infinite amount of wars, which is why we have forever wars, wars that last 20 years, wars that last for 15 years. That's not a normal thing. You go back in time, go back in the day, they weren't fighting a bunch of 20-year wars that were just wars of attrition. The wars were usually pretty quick and pretty brutal, and then that was it. But now we can do these things where we can feed the prison industrial complex forever. We can feed all these government contractors and military contractors forever. And it's because we can just print up money. Who cares? Someone else will pay for it later. Someone else will foot the bill later. We'll keep raising the debt ceiling. Someone else can deal with that later. And that's just the way it goes. We have misaligned incentives. When you talk about, again, corporations owning pretty much everything, they own the incentives of a lot of the experts. So again, you want to talk about Bitcoin in search of a problem. No, Bitcoin is the solution to the problems that we're facing today. Bitcoin is a way to try to end corruption. You can't print Bitcoin. You actually have to prove work. That's what you have to do in order to acquire Bitcoin. And there's going to come a point where there's nothing you can do besides proof of work to earn Bitcoins. And then when that day comes, we'll have a much more fair and just and honest world because you won't be able to cheat anyone out of their value or cheat anyone out of their time. All right. When people work a 9 to 5, a soul crushing 9 to 5 at a useless job, and you make a little bit of money every single year, when they print money out of thin air, they're literally stealing your time away. That's not very fair or ethical, but that's happening in real life, which is the reason why they have to keep boosting their retirement age. All right. Which is the reason why you have to work more hours just to afford the same stuff. All right. The house that used to require 40,000 hours or 10,000 hours of work now costs 40,000 hours of work. Same job because the job didn't keep up with the rate of inflation. The rate of inflation is the rate of monetary debasement, which is the rate of money printing. So those are just like two easy examples. There are hundreds more. There's only so many hours in a day. So we can't sit here and list them all. But that's the curiosity thing. That'll send you down the rabbit hole. That's really all I can say. Bitcoin does fix everything. Some people say, oh, Bitcoin only fixes half of our problems. I'm willing to go ahead and say it fixes 100% because it changes who you are internally and it also changes your external reality as well. So Bitcoin will solve 100% of the problems, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the things that I love about Bitcoin is how it changes you as a person. There's this concept called self-Bitcoinization. You basically take on the principles of Bitcoin and you you become Bitcoin essentially. It's a beautiful thing. But I love those explanations and I love your conviction and I love your ability to explain things. You've got a gift. And I'm glad I found your channel and you're a true gift to the Bitcoin community and I can't wait to see where your channel goes. And thank you again for coming on here and hopefully we can keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
excited to put this on the channel. Keep doing your thing. There are people who actually do real work in the world, like yourself. You're like a doctor. I don't know what kind of doctor you are, but I'm sure you're actually helping people. I'm just talking on the internet, and some of my stuff is useful. There are real jobs that people do out there, and everyone with a job that they actually care about and are passionate about, they will integrate Bitcoin into their daily work to the point where it won't feel like work to them. You know what I mean? And I think that Bitcoin will destroy a lot of useless jobs and there'll only be useful jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, take care. I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Signal. In a world drowning in noise, signal is everything. Most people are overwhelmed, distracted, and deceived, not because they lack intelligence, but because they've lost the ability to discern what truly matters. But signal cuts through the noise. And Bitcoin is pure signal. It doesn't promise, it doesn't lie, it doesn't bend to opinion or propaganda. It just is. And as the world descends into even more chaos, distraction, and distortion, your ability to identify signal, to recognize what's real, true, and timeless will be one of your greatest assets. So stay sharp, stay sovereign, stay tuned, because here on The Signal, we don't follow trends, we follow truth. I'm Dr. Satoshi, and in a world of noise, we are the signal.